AccountantsWorld hosts your and your client's data on Amazon Web Service. Sorry about that. The same industry-leading IT infrastructure used by Amazon.com to run their entire business. Those servers are fully secure and comply with leading industry certifications, including ISO 27001 and SAS 70 Type 2 audits. Encryption. All our web servers are secured using secure socket layer SSL servers. They are assigned a secure certificate ID that
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, I don't know if we had some audio problems, but I'll continue. We're talking about encryption, and all our web servers are secured with SSL. Servers are assigned a secure certificate ID that identifies the website and enables us to use SSL for secure data transfer. To protect your and your client's critical financial information while it is transmitted over the internet, all critical information is encrypted using 128-bit SSL green bar digital certificates from GoDaddy. Okay. For further protection, sensitive information remains encrypted while stored on our servers. So basically, putting aside all the technological terminology, we have gone to extremes to make sure that the data, your data and your client's data, is secure and kept confidential. So let's move on with system controls. Let's talk about access. Okay, you want to restrict authorized staff with user ID and a strong password. You want to periodically review authorized access, and do not share your login information, and always use strong passwords. Process and procedures. You want to have a process and procedure to revoke access to terminated employees. You want to use audit trails to track and identify changes to data by users. Okay, Payroll Leaf does provide an invaluable report for this task, which we'll touch upon later. You want to use system edits and alerts. Okay, we'll look at some of these also later. And lastly, you want to document all internal and external controls and periodically test them for effectiveness. Make certain to always have the most up-to-date antivirus protection. Again, payroll fraud is a big item. Okay, 30% of businesses are affected annually. Okay. Here's a story that I found. After the payroll director inputted vacation and severance pay to the employee payroll records, he simply replaced their bank information with his own. The number of fraudulent payments made to his own bank account using this scam was 134 payments before he got caught. Okay. In Payroll Relief, we have implemented several security features to prevent items like this. In Payroll Relief, there are safeguards related to employee direct deposit information. So, for example, changes are logged, and we highly recommend that you review the employee changes report, which we'll discuss later. System does not allow changes to multiple accounts in one viewing, and only an admin login can modify employee bank information. If not already in place, we need you to develop and maintain controls and processes to prevent fraud. With this being said, you want to be careful how you define the engagement. Okay, know the client. You want to use greater diligence with a new client, which may pose a higher risk. Perhaps only offer EFT for taxes at first, and wait to offer direct deposit. Identify current payroll method. Okay, if the client's coming from another reputable payroll provider, then there is some confidence. If it's somebody who's telling you that they have been doing the payroll by hand, I wouldn't consider that too much with confidence. And only take fiscally responsible clients. Okay, you want to make a proposal that's best suited for the client. Okay, so know what tasks the client is capable of handling. And as many of you know, A strong characteristic of Payroll Relief is that it's customizable. This allows you the flexibility to offer a service where your firm does all the work, or the client does most of the work if they have somebody that's payroll savvy on staff, or somewhere in between. So you can use this customization to better control who performs certain tasks. And lastly, your written client engagement. You want to outline the client responsibilities, who is responsible for what, like for example, NSF situations, who do you call in such cases, what if that person is not available, is there an alternate contact, what you do and what you don't do, and also cover your fees and how they are collected. You want to analyze internal resources. Okay, define internal roles. For example, staffing. Who does what, when? Assign backup staff for all tasks or situations from when a staff member is out on vacation or ill. You want to cross-train your staff. For example, who handles the processing of ACH applications? When are they submitted? If that staff member is on vacation, who will handle the processing of these ACH applications? You want to have a backup plan. You want to archive data and forms. You want to have a procedure for backing up the data that you need. There's an archive functionality in Payroll Relief, which I'll point out in a few minutes, and also notices. Okay, when the notices come in from the IRS or from the state agencies, who handles them? How are they handled? And what is the process for handling notices? Second item is you want to set up formal procedures, how to handle exceptions such as NSFs, or a situation where you exceeded the direct deposit limit, or a next day tax situation when you exceeded the $100,000 same day liability for federal purposes. What's your process for processing bonus, commissions, and additional payrolls? How to handle e-file rejections, if any, managing compliance, who does that part of the task for your payroll clients. And you want to ensure proper oversight. Okay? Quality assurance for the payroll process, in other words, peer review. Have different staff members perform different tasks to help facilitate cross-training and help identify inconsistent practices within processes that can lead to lapses in control. And lastly, you want to maximize efficiencies. You want to go over these processes again to ensure the highest efficiency. As the payroll processor, these steps are very important in ensuring that your operation does run smoothly. So we talked about archiving data. Okay, that is pertinent, that's archiving pertinent client data. So for example, Payroll Relief now includes our cloud-based document management system called Cloud Cabinet to assist you with this task. So if you do not already own the Cloud Cabinet application, you may simply click on the cloud icon to access a standard version of the program. Okay. And now what will happen is you automatically archive to our Cloud Cabinet applications the payroll set report for each payroll processed after you have printed the checks. And secondly, all compliance forms after each quarter are archived automatically. Or you may choose to archive at your leisure. Just look for the archive button on the top right of the screen. Okay, tax forms and all the report screens do have this archive button or functionality at the screen. Payroll Relief also offers export to Excel functionality throughout various screens. Okay, there are two of many that, in my opinion, are worthy of mention because of their importance. The first one is the payroll register, which is found under the payroll processing menu. If you want to save all payroll register information, okay, whether for a particular payroll or specific period of time, for one employee or for all employees, you may do so from this screen. Okay, you will get a complete download of the database of the payroll register for the period of the employee selected into an Excel file that you can keep as an archive, as a backup of your data. And secondly, there's the ACH transactions under the e-services menu. Okay, I strongly recommend to all users of electronic fund transfers to archive this information for a complete record of ACH transactions for a specific period of time. Okay, ideally, it would be for the full year and for all transactions, because as you can see on the screen, you can query and sort by a specific type of transaction. Let's say you want to see all your direct deposit transactions, or your taxes, or your billing, or child support. But I would archive and download to Excel all types of transactions for the entire year so that I have a backup. Okay, notice that the trace number for every transaction is a link. Now, if I click on one of these links, okay, I get a detailed report of the transaction that I can use as a printout as proof of the transaction. Okay, so remember that whenever you are viewing a screen report, as this one, just look for the Excel button. Okay, if the screen has the Excel button in the top right-hand corner, that data is exportable to Excel for archival purposes. Okay, let's move on to the employer setup and the employee setup. Here as well, you need to have processes for setting up the employer. One of the things you may use is the employer setup worksheet and the resources as an input sheet. Ideally, you want to perform this test yourself, because by doing so, you will become familiar with the client and its structure. Payroll Relief allows employers to track their match contribution for the employee retirement plans. So from the employer deduction screen, just click on the retirement plan button to access the setup screen. Okay. Once you get to that screen, check on the box to indicate that you want Payroll Relief to calculate and track retirement plan employer contributions and whether to include these amounts in third-party checks. Okay. So first you want to define what you would like to be included in the definition of compensation. So when I say my 401k is 10% of compensation, define here what you want included in compensation. Secondly, you want to define the plan criteria. Okay, so in this example here, this employer match is 25% of the employee's contribution, or 25 cents on the dollar, up to the lesser of 2,500, or 2.5 of the employee annual compensation. For plans with multiple tiers, you may use additional fields and indicate at what percentage of compensation each tier ends. The help for this screen provides some insightful examples. Also, you may indicate the start date of the employer match as either a calendar date or a number of days after the employee has been hired. Here, the employer match begins on the first day of the 6th month following the employer hire date. Employee setup. With regard to the employee setup, you can do this with a simple mouse click. Okay, Payroll Relief does offer a template under the employee setup, as you can see here on the screen. It's a CSV file editable in Excel, and that you can easily complete, and then the employer or yourself can import with a single mouse click all the employee information. Okay. Now, one thing to note here is that after setting up the employer pay types and deductions, okay, you may use this employee setup to import any amount of employees, whether it's 5 or 1,000. But what's key here is that once you've set up the pay types and the deductions, those will be columns in this file that you can enter and then import into the program. Okay, before we get into e-services, let us briefly go over fees. Okay, this question does come up quite often, especially with new firms joining us. What's included? What's included are those items in the normal course of business. Okay, so it would be all electronic fund transfer transactions created in the normal course of business, such as direct deposits, taxes, child support, and client billing. Okay, that's all included in your payroll fees. Now, what's additional is the only additional fees really are those listed in the ACH application correction fees addendum that arise outside of the normal course of business, such as non-sufficient funds, returns, recalls, traces, credit returns, and bank correction fees. Okay, these are all not your ACH transactions that are not part of ordinary course of business and that are chargeable to us as well as to you. Okay, in our e-services section, we're going to look at bank information validation. We'll briefly talk about the ACH application and Form 8655. We'll mention enabling certain e-services. We'll look at client billing. And lastly, we'll go over the NSFs, recalls, and fees. So, bank information validation. When you're entering or changing sensitive information, such as bank accounts, whether it's for the employer or the employee, your process should secure confidentiality. Okay? Have limited staff access, and as discussed earlier, provide safeguarding. It's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of having controls in place. Okay? Yes, we trust our staff. However, we need to have controls in place. Also, when changing bank information, your controls should include a check on how the change affects the transaction in payroll relief. Okay? So, for example, if the transaction was already created, then it will be processed with the old bank account information. An example of that would be an approved payroll with direct deposit debit or employee credits. Going forward, no transactions will be created until the new bank has been validated. Therefore, timing of any change should be planned carefully. Okay. An excellent source to check your ACH transactions is the ACH transaction screen under e-services. A usual review or quick review of the e-services snapshot will also provide valuable information. And an important fact to keep in mind is that the bank validation is done for security reasons. Okay. The benefit is that it verifies the employer account and to some extent its legitimacy. Okay, this is the reason why we do the bank validation, which most of you are familiar with the process. Another important process is the completion and the submission of the application for electronic fund transfers, as well as Form 8655. Which we recently redesigned into two separate screens or processes, if you will. Okay. Now, if all is done correctly, the whole process should not take more than 4 to 5 business days before you get your client up and running with electronic transactions. Your process should include a thorough review of the documents prior to upload to ensure completion and proper authorized signatures. Safeguarding of the documents. Okay, remember, the application for electronic fund transfers does contain the principal's Social Security number. You need to have proper follow-up to avoid delays or unnecessary denials. Be sure to monitor and follow through on the process in a timely manner. Make sure you're checking your emails for any correspondence, as well as the program. Again, the e-services snapshot or the e-file screen. To monitor the status of the applications, you can use the snapshot screen from the e-services drop-down menu, or you can view the status from the Payroll Center ACH applications to monitor the status of all your employer's applications. And to monitor Forms 8655, you can use the Manage 8655 screen, which is accessible from the Payroll Center menu as well. For your convenience, there are two links at the top right of the screen that explain in detail the e-services process. Okay. Reading these documents is a must for any staff member working with payroll leave. Please take the time to read them. It is important that you and your staff, and if applicable, your client, understand how the e-services process works within payroll leave. Also, it is important that you pay attention to the screen text and instructions. Here, for example, we have included suggested guidelines for managing risk. Okay, you can't see it on the screen. It's in the way at the bottom left of the screen, the title, Risk Management Guidelines, but I do want to take a minute to read what it says on that screen. It says, to reduce liabilities and risk, we strongly recommend that you exercise due diligence with regard to the client's financial viability before you agree to provide e-services, particularly for clients with whom you have no prior relationship. You need to establish a standard credit policy to clearly define conditions that exclude clients from e-services. Do not offer e-services to clients who have financial problems, poor credit, outstanding liens, judgments, current write-offs, or other credit problems. A client who cannot provide a street address, a landline business phone number, business website, or a business email address. An employer who cannot provide payroll reports from a prior processor, and an employer that insists that they must run a new payroll immediately. Okay, these are all flags of possible or high risk. Enabling certain e-services. A thorough understanding of the e-services process will ensure a quick enrollment process and the enabling of all services desired. Okay, keep in mind that once the ACH application is accepted, only federal e-services such as direct deposit and auto e-file are enabled. Okay, for all other e-services such as states and child support, as well as client billing, you must enable the service yourself. Make sure to include this required action in your process and controls. Okay, and one very important item as far as the state taxes, do not use bogus numbers. This will only generate headaches and possible late or failure to file pay notices. Okay, these ID numbers are critical for the proper posting of the client's compliance payments and forms. Okay, so if you use a bogus number, once the state receives those funds or that form, they're not going to know who to apply it to because they're coming in with a bogus number. Most states, for both taxes and child support, require an employer registration separately from what you do in payroll relief with the ACH application and Form 8655. So you need to include in your process the reading of the state requirements right here. Okay, each state has requirements. And do not enable any service unless you know the employer or yourself or your staff has registered with the state and has provided the proper account numbers. Once accepted, keep in mind that you have the ability to enable or disable any service that the client wants or does not want to use. Okay, one thing that we do strongly discourage is enabling on and off, on and off. But you do have that flexibility to disable what the client does not want to use. Client billing is offered in payroll relief as a convenience feature. Okay, it is not intended as a full billing program. It is only for the convenience of you collecting your payroll processing fees electronically from your clients. If used, you should have a separate billing process to invoice your clients. Okay, you simply enter your fees, indicate how and when you would like the client's bank account to be debited, and you enable the service. Keep in mind that you must have authorization from your client to initiate transactions. Okay. Under the e-services preferences screen, you will find the employer billing authorization form to be kept for your records, and the checkbox to indicate that you have received client authorization. Okay. I would like to emphasize that it is a natural rule that you cannot debit anyone's account without proper authorization. Therefore, not only the employer billing authorization, but also the employee direct deposit authorizations must be kept on file. Okay, so that's another thing that you need to incorporate into your controls and procedures. Okay, so we have arrived at perhaps the most important topic of e-services, and that's NSFs. And again, we can't say it enough, only take fiscally responsible clients. Okay. Non-sufficient funds are the number 2 problem that we see in electronic services after bogus account numbers, okay. Especially with taxes, but many times also with direct deposits, with client billings, and even with bank validations, which are less than $1. Okay. These are labor intensive and they're an inconvenience to you, your client, and us. So the simple solution, have better controls and planning. How do we avoid NSFs? Well, we need to talk to the clients and help them understand how important it is to plan properly and allocate funds for tax payments. Defaulting on a payroll tax payment is not cost effective, by no means. Okay? Penalties plus interest can quickly add up. Okay? Plus, you have NSF fees and the time labor costs addressing these non-sufficient funds. The IRS will apply any deposit to the most recent liability, leaving the older unpaid liabilities accumulating yet more interest and a stiffer penalty. Okay. The IRS, as we all know, collects millions of dollars in late payment penalties and interest every year. And we're all very familiar with those notices that just keep on coming. A history of NSFs will jeopardize the client's credit and your reputation. E-services will be disabled and eventually ACH application will be frozen. Okay. So again, if there's cash flow problems, do not enable EFT, make manual payments, or you can use the option to change the settlement date. But don't, whatever you do, don't enable the feature, because you may forget at one point and it may cause even more problems down the road. Okay. Item 13 of the ACH application addresses debit returns and the firm's obligations. So let us take a minute to read item 13 of the ACH application, which states, if AccountantsWorld cannot collect amounts due because of insufficient funds in employer's account or any other reason, the firm agrees to pay the amount due immediately upon demand, plus applicable AccountantsWorld exception processing fees as enumerated in the corrections fee addendum to this document. So you are the payroll processor, so make it a priority to be diligent with your clients' direct deposit payroll and in general, all electronic payments. Protect yourself from the hassle, inconvenience, and possible liability. No funds in the account, then simply no e-services at all. Okay. Again, you know your clients and you know their cash flow. After all, you're their accountant. In cases where it is a new client, consider delaying the direct deposit, or advise them that at first you will not be able to process payrolls with direct deposit unless there is a 4 to 5 business day window, leaving us enough time to make sure that there is funds in the account. So in summary, we need your collaboration in ensuring that the whole process runs smoothly and in avoiding the hassle and inconvenience that comes along with non-sufficient funds. Okay, we're your partner. However, we're not your client's lending bank. So I'm going to divert a little bit here and talk about I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about an email that just went out last week to all payroll customers. I hope you all have read it. There has been some conversation in our forum about it, so I thought I would review during this webinar. Okay. So basically what the email's message is that we have noticed that what was the exception has become the norm for some employers. Okay. And let me give you two examples of that. And as the email starts saying, we have noticed a growing number of employer ACH returns or NSFs. Okay. And two examples that come to mind, okay, and these do happen quite often. In one example, okay, we had an employer that NSF their direct deposit payroll pretty much every payroll. And then they proceeded to wire the funds. Okay. So it became standard practice. Every payroll, NSF, wire funds. NSF, wire funds. Okay. In the second case, and even more frequent than with direct deposits, taxes, same thing. Okay. They would NSF the tax and then wire the funds. NSF the tax and wire the funds. Okay. So yes, they're wiring the funds, they're funding the NSF, sure. However, this is not evident of an employer or a firm that has controls and processes in place. Okay, and it's costly because every direct deposit NSF has a fee, and every tax NSF fee has a fee. Okay, so basically the summary of this whole email is two things, and the summary of changes really. One is that the NSF fee for direct deposits has been increased from $100 to $125. Okay. And second, and more importantly, is that really what we're doing is we are enforcing our policies and procedures as they relate to NSFs and wires. Okay. As for those of you who are familiar with our NSF emails, okay, they state clearly that there are consequences to repetitive NSFs. So, for example, our NSF wire transfer information email has a sentence at the end that says, to avoid further interruptions in service, please ensure that the employer has sufficient funds in their bank account to cover debits on the date the funds are debited. Okay, and then there's even another email that's an NSF warning for a particular employer. And again, that email contains a sentence at the end that says, please be advised that any further returns will result in the suspension of this client's ACH services. So I reiterate that the recent email was just to advise you that we are now enforcing our own controls and procedures as they relate to NSF and wire transfers. So some of you are familiar with the firm guarantee. Some of you may have already had a firm guarantee for some of your clients, but I do want to cover it. And I'm going to cover it under direct deposit because this is where it's mostly used. However, note that it covers all ACH transactions. Now, what is the purpose of the firm guarantee? Well, from the perspective of both you and the firm, you, the firm, and us, the ACH processor, it is to reduce risk. That's the bottom line. It also helps you to reevaluate your risk and to reconsider offering e-services to your client. Okay, because now you're going to be filling out a firm guarantee. You're going to be guaranteeing this client's funds. You're going to have some processes and procedures to make sure that you're not setting yourself up for fraud or for more liabilities. When is it required? We expect that you as the payroll processor and being directly involved and engaged with your client, that you have done your due diligence. However, our finance department also does their due diligence, and based on a set of guidelines, if your client does not meet these guidelines and you still want to offer electronic fund transfers to this client, then a firm guarantee will be required by our finance department. Okay. Without getting into the details of our guidelines, some of the reasons that you may be asked for a firm guarantee is that the client has an unfavorable credit score, or the amount of direct deposit is very large, or you and the client are requesting a 2-day direct deposit processing turnaround time. Okay. When to use it? Again, we strongly encourage you to have your own set of guidelines when signing payroll clients for electronic fund transfers, and an even stricter set of guidelines for clients you wish to guarantee. This is not a guarantee to take lightly. It is a legal addendum to the ACH application, and both documents have your signature. So be selective, protect yourself, and the backbone of your payroll service, which is us. For more details, refer to the ACH overview document that I referenced earlier that's accessible from the ACH application screen. And again, remember, you are the payroll processor, we are your back office and facilitator, and together we are the team. Okay, let's briefly talk about recalls. Recalls can be initiated from the eServices recall screen. The first order of business would be to look at the notes link here at the bottom of the screen. Reason being that it provides the following information. One, it provides the valid reasons for a recall per NACHA regulations, which are duplicate payment, payment to an incorrect receiver, and payment of an incorrect amount. Those are the only three reasons that NACHA approves. AccountantsWorld LLC will process the direct deposit reversal for the above referenced employee as requested. Should recall fail, it will be the employer's responsibility to collect these funds from the employee. So in other words, you initiate the recall, we process it. If the employee has not withdrawn the funds from the account and the recall is successful, we credit the employer back. If not, if it's unsuccessful, then it's the responsibility of the employer and the employee to work out that discrepancy. And lastly, NACHA regulations require that the employee contractor be notified of the recall. So once you have selected the employee, select the reason, acknowledge that you understand that the recall may or may not be successful, and submit the recall in the upper right-hand corner. One last item on e-services, and yet another email that I want to bring up, which I think is important. In an attempt to assist you with controls and procedures, we created a risk management checklist, which we shared with you in an email back on July 7th of 2017. Okay, please make sure to implement this into your controls and procedures. Okay, it's a very helpful checklist that we've generated for you. Payroll risk management guidelines for firms. So make sure you take a look at that. Okay, let's move on from e-services to the payroll process. The payroll process is a repetitive, ongoing cycle in which if something goes wrong at any stage, it carries into the next stage, compounding the problem and the aggravation. So you need to save yourself the aggravation, and it's our experience that there's a tendency to take this area lightly or for granted, and not exercise due diligence or have established controls and procedures. Okay, we believe that this is because the nature of payroll, that it's a reoccurring cycle, and that for the most part, with little or no change. This is precisely why it lends itself to mistakes, aggravation, and even fraud. Okay. It is these types of processes that require the boring checklists and the long documentation. The engagement and setup are one-time events. Okay, this is not. This is a continuous process that requires processes and controls to run smoothly. So what are some of those controls? Well, you want to set up and document a daily ongoing process for payroll processing. You want to document the entire process from data collection to check printing and distribution. Okay, so data collection, who's entering the hours? Is it the client? Is it the client's locations? Or is it a staff member in the firm? And how is the data entry done? Is it done on screen? Is it uploaded from the Excel spreadsheet that we provide in the program? Or is it faxed in by the employer? The calculation, before going ahead with payroll, this is a good time to ask the question, does the client have the funds? Okay. You want payroll review. What is the process for reviewing the payroll? Who's reviewing prior to and after approval? Okay, other reports being printed or emailed. Approving the payroll. Who's approving the payroll? What's the process for approving the payroll? Okay, here's a tip. If the firm's approving the payroll, have a different staff member review the payroll for any discrepancies. Okay, check printing. Who's printing the paychecks and the direct deposit advisors? You want to set up process and controls for everyday ongoing issues that may arise and how to handle them. Okay, so we touched briefly upon this before. If there's a client delay in providing the information, what about if a bonus or commission payroll pops up? NSFs, whether it's taxes or payroll, who's handling it? The person must be accessible during business hours. Have a process for handling exceeded direct deposit limits or the next day tax due situation. Okay, that's a critical one. You run a bonus payroll and somehow your federal liability exceeded 100,000. That's due the next day, and you need to have a process in place to ensure that that does take place. Okay, let's talk about some general controls. Data entry. Okay, data entry of payroll is an important job. The payroll department should have edit and control functions in place for maintaining the accuracy of data. Control and edit functions ensure that only appropriate data are entered and that the data entered is confirmed. Companies use two types of control functions. They use validity tests and control edits. Okay. You want to use also batch and hash control totals. Okay. Data entered into the payroll system must be controlled to ensure that the data are intended to be entered have actually been entered. Okay. Batch controls are designed to ensure that a batch of data has entered correctly. Okay, I'm sure all of you as accountants are familiar with the batch control and the totals at the line to ensure that the amounts were entered correctly. And third, balancing and reconciling. Another way to verify the integrity of the information in the payroll system is through balancing and account reconciliation procedures. These procedures include the following. Okay, the master record of the employee payments must be maintained and edited to substantiate federal and state tax returns. All payroll liability accounts should be reconciled monthly to verify the company's liability and unpaid taxes. Payroll liability accounts for deductions must be balanced to the pay registers to ensure that the amount in liability accounts is accurate. And lastly, bank accounts for payroll should be reconciled monthly with all outstanding checks researched and all stale dated checks cleared. Okay, these are regular, ongoing checks and audits that you need to have in place. So in payroll leave, okay, the payroll summary screen is perhaps the most valuable screen in the process and can be viewed prior and after payroll approval. The reason it's so valuable is that it contains pertinent information about the payroll. We recommend that you pay close attention to the details here on this screen. For example, notice that this payroll has more checks than employees. Okay, that means that some employees received a second check. Pay close attention to the warnings, as well as options selected in the payroll. You may need to take proper actions. Okay, notice under options, it shows that the late direct deposit was authorized. Okay, this is a warning. There's also a warning that a terminated employee has been included in the payroll. Okay, so these are the system edits and checks that I mentioned before that you need to pay close attention to and that your system should have and payroll leave does have. Okay, so we're warning you that you're paying a terminated employee. Okay, we're letting you know that for a particular reason, let's say you missed the processing time, you authorized late direct deposit. Okay, and again, it has a summary of all the cost of the payroll as well. You need a process to handle the situation of EFT limit exceeded. Okay, in this particular case, the employer indicated on their ACH application that the average direct deposit would be $15,000. Okay, so with this payroll, they have grossly exceeded the limit, and the only options are: one, to disable direct deposit for high pay employees so that the payroll is within the normal dollar limit. or you can wire transfer the funds to AccountantsWorld no later than 2 p.m. Eastern Time the day before the payday. That date's a little outdated because the screenshot's a little outdated. Okay, and if you do elect to wire, you need to check the box and acknowledge the fact that you're doing that. Again, this usually occurs when you process a bonus and or commission payroll. Had they exceeded their limit by a more acceptable amount, the system would have given the option to process the payroll on a 4-day processing window instead of a 3-day. I cannot get into the details, or nor do I have the time to get into them of how the system calculations come up with the respective options. The main point here is that in situations like this one, both you and the client need to plan properly and avoid panic at the last minute. Okay, here's another situation, very common, especially during holidays. Okay, bank holidays affect payroll processing with direct deposit. You need to process 1 day earlier than normal. Okay, so note that in payroll leave, the next banking holiday does display at the bottom left of the data entry screen 2 weeks before the holiday. Also, an announcement is usually posted in the program announcements, especially for those easy to forget bank holidays that fall during tax season, like Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, and also as well as Columbus and Veterans Day during October and November. Last but not least is that you need to have a process in place when this occurs. Okay. Yes, you may request an exception, and if approved, you can pay the $100 fee or $125 fee to have employees paid on time, but it's a cost and an aggravation that could be avoided by simply having controls in place. Another item in payroll processing is modifying a paycheck. That should be a function only allowed to the staff unless you feel the client can handle this. Okay? The staff and the client, if given permission, should understand the consequences of modifying a check. A process should be in place to ensure that the function is used properly and that the results are those that you expected. Check printing. Okay, are the checks printed per employer when you actually right after you process and approve the payroll, or are they printed in batch? Okay, you need to have a documented process for check and report printing. Okay, are they printed or are they emailed, or both? And lastly, what is the method of distribution? Okay, where are they printed? Are they printed in the firm's office? Are they printed in the client's office? The easiest is probably archive to cloud cabinet or email to the client. If email, make sure to use the password protected in the employer practices screen. Okay. Managing your payroll practice. And we're almost finished. Managing your payroll could be quite cumbersome. This is why Payroll Leave is the only program in the market that offers you the tools to manage and analyze payroll service. Very certain to have at a high level a documented process on how and when to use these tools and controls in the processing of payrolls, as well as compliance purposes. So not just for processing, but also compliance. You're most likely familiar with some of these tools I'm going to go over. However, I think it's important enough to review them very quickly in this webinar. Probably the most important, especially if you have a large number of clients, is the employee-employer changes report, which we've been talking about throughout the whole webinar. So, under firm administration, you may notice you may also view your client's activity, okay, in detail or in summary. The screen provides such information as how many payrolls the client has run, how many checks, how many direct deposits, if there's any contracted 1099s, how many W-2s, okay, and any failed Social Security numbers, all at a simple glance for all your employees. So this is a very useful screen, especially when it comes time to renewal and you're looking to buy our fixed price check per check fee. You want to look at the bottom and see what's your check count, and that will give you a good idea of what package to purchase based on your practice. Okay. We talked about the ability to collect your payroll processing and compliance fees via EFT ACH. The processing fee screen also under firm administration allows you to view pending and billed fees for all your clients for a specific period of time. Okay. From this screen, you may review all employers to ensure that fees you are charging are in line with the client engagement. E-services. Okay, so you need to get a bird's eye view of your client's e-services. You can view this under the Payroll Center ACH application profile screen. Okay, and as you can see on screen, it has all the clients listed and a number of columns indicating, for example, their processing dates for direct deposit, the approved amount for direct deposit, whether the bank has been validated, whether they're using direct deposit, whether they're using EFT or pre-funding, and lastly, whether they're using the auto e-file function. Under the Payroll Center, the payroll activity screen allows you to view for all your clients today's payrolls, approved and in progress. Okay, so if you see here, there's two radio buttons, today's payrolls approved today, payrolls in progress, and it tells you their status. Also here is where you will find that very important employer-employee changes report, which is the second tab. As mentioned earlier, under System Payroll Controls, use audit trails to track and identify changes to data by user. Okay. This report is the tool that Payroll Relief provides to achieve this task. We strongly recommend that you use this report on a regular basis as a control for possible irregularities. Okay. So if you look at the screen, you'll see that it shows the employer name. Okay. It shows the category of the change. In this particular case, I'm showing direct deposits. It shows the employee's name whose direct deposit account was altered, what the description is, what the old value is, what the new value is, and lastly, who was the user, and it has a date stamp of when the change was made. Okay, so for example, towards the middle bottom of the screen, it says that direct deposit for Maria DeSico was off and it was turned on by Carlos, and the date. Okay, you can see that right after that, the bank account information was changed from a blank to an account number. Okay, and in the category area, if you click on that, okay, you can sort, or you can just show changes for a particular category. So you can say all categories, or you can look at, like in the case just noted, direct deposits, or you may want to look at any salary changes, any voided checks, any tax information, and so forth. So again, very, very valuable report. It is also available on a per employer basis under the management reports. So if you're in a particular employer, you can go to management reports, and this report will be available there as well. However, this one here is the one that covers all your clients. Okay, very quickly down the stretch, compliance. The Managed Compliance Reports under the Payroll Center offers you 7 different tabs for managing all aspects of compliance for your clients in one screen. Okay, these are covered in detail in our headache-free compliance, payroll compliance webinar, which will be scheduled for next month. Just very quickly, the first 3 tabs relate to electronic filing. The exception reports is a must if you're using auto e-file. You also have unsuccessful e-file, rejected e-files. The next 2 tabs are forms due within the next month and forms past due. As part of your controls, this screen should be reviewed at least once a month to make sure that there is no past due forms. You can use the Managed Taxes screen to review for all employers a list of their tax liabilities and payments for a range of dates based on pay date. The Federal Lookback screen is a critical screen at year-end, used to review all the client's tax deposit frequencies and for federal purposes. So I would like to summarize that this section by saying that with these tools, you are able to keep track of your clients, their payrolls and compliance, and any changes to sensitive information. you are in full control. Okay. These tools definitely give you full control of everything that's going on with your payroll clients. For your convenience in developing and maintaining controls, Payroll Relief has gathered all payroll-related documents made available in the program's resources area. Supporting documents such as employer billing authorization, okay, your employee direct deposit authorization form is here, standard power of attorney, your firm ACH funds guarantee, and overdraft protection template. And even sample letters of engagement at the bottom, and there's more, okay? On the menu here, there are training, supporting documents, employment forms, forms of publications, links, tools, webinars, recording webinars, such as this one, and marketing material, and some sample reports. Okay, so we've covered a lot of material, and I apologize for going a little bit over as far as time goes. We've covered a lot with emphasis on developing and maintaining controls, both external and internal to payroll relief. Okay, so let's quickly summarize. Payroll is frequently the largest operating expense of a business. When you factor in the confidential payroll information to the financial aspects, developing and maintaining adequate controls within the payroll environment is essential. Physical, the importance of safeguarding confidential information and access to physical payroll locations and documents. Staffing, due diligence in hiring and assigning tasks to appropriate staff. System, the most detailed of the three areas, and one we obviously wanted to place more emphasis on was the use of payroll relief features and tools to help you in developing and maintaining controls. I spoke briefly about defining the client engagement and the employer and employee setup processes. We covered a lot in the topic of e-services because this area is critical and requires perhaps the most controls. Another key area to ensure smooth payroll operation is the daily and routine processing of client payrolls. I spoke about the importance of having check and balances throughout the process and having staff review each other's work. At a higher level, I showed you how the unique and advanced management and analytical tools that Payroll Relief offers you, and stressed the importance of incorporating these into your processes and controls. Especially the employer-employee changes report for accurately tracking and identifying changes to sensitive data by users. And lastly, we went over a vast amount of payroll-related resources available to you, your staff, and your clients. So don't let the lack of controls ruin your business. Take the time to develop and maintain controls to ensure a smooth running payroll service. And relax having the confidence that your payroll service is operating efficiently and profitably. Just a reminder that registration information for payroll relief training webinars is posted on my portal. And I want to thank you for attending the Payroll Relief Developing and Maintaining Payroll Controls webinar. I hope that this was informative. And again, I apologize that there was a lot of material to cover, and I did go over a little bit on time. But now I will be happy with my colleague Roger to address any questions and answers that any questions that you may have. And thank you again for your time.
Hi, Carlos. Great webinar, as usual. We're up to date on questions, so
thank you.
We're attentively listening to you.
Okay, so maybe now the questions will come in.
Yes, yes.
Mm. Did we have audio problem in the very beginning, Roger?
Yeah, I think we did have a little audio problem. But only one
Because
person.
I started presenting, and then the teleconference center kind of jumped in when I was like through 2 or 3 slides into the presentation, and I was concerned that maybe they didn't hear the beginning of it.
Yeah, I would say they if anything, they might have missed. They were seeing your screens because I was seeing it, but they might have missed the screen that had the outline, with the topics that you're going to
Okay.
cover. So it was missed very little. Only one person, I think, actually. Ashley, she brought something up. That she said the audio went away, but no one else did. So I imagine everybody else heard it fine. Here's some questions coming in. How long has the auto archive to the cloud been in effect? Do I need to go back to 2016 to archive reports? Well, it's been in effect
the auto
for
archive.
about
The auto
a
archive.
month. Oh, the auto archive's been in for a while.
You can answer it, but the auto archive has been there for a while. What we added recently was that now everybody gets a scaled down version of Cloud Cabinet, so that now everybody has Cloud Cabinet and everybody gets auto archived to the Cloud Cabinet, and that was about I would say 6 months ago.
The early part of the year. Yeah, so Nikki just commented there was no audio for about 6 minutes. That was about probably right.
Fernando Castro has a question. Could I auto archive to my own Cloud Cabinet? Well, Cloud Cabinet is the proprietary name of our document management system that's cloud-based. So if you're referring to the regular Cloud Cabinet full version that you pay for, absolutely, it's probably already auto archiving. If you're referring to another document management system that's cloud-based, then no, you cannot auto archive. You would have to manually archive.
No, he's got he's got the Cloud Cabinet through
okay, so
Power Practice,
he's
I believe, so he should be okay. Yep. Hey, Fernando.
Okay, Michael has a question. I have a client that has had these orders canceled as a result. Many payroll tax deposits and tax forms have not been made. How do I make late tax deposits and late filing returns? Okay, the returns you need to paper file because you cannot e-file late in our system. The tax deposits, you can go to the and I cover this in the headache-free compliance payroll webinar. You can go into the special payment options under compliance, and there you can schedule an EFT payment, and indicate that you need it paid. But again, keep in mind that it is late and it will have penalties and interest, but you can at least use the system to make the payment electronically. Janine, if I click on the compliance tab, I'm unable to see tax forms for the third quarter of 2017. That's because these forms will be scheduled on October 1st, the beginning of the compliance month. Kerry, will we be alerted when clients whose ACH transaction has been turned off be eligible for ACH again? Okay, so obviously you have read our email, and Well, you'll be alerted when it happens, and then there's I believe, a 2 or 3 month waiting period. I don't remember exactly. And then at that point, you would have to take the initiative. There would not be another alert saying, okay, now this client is eligible. Byron has a question. One of our clients was set up for 944 annual. Can I paper file 941 for the unfiled periods? You can paper file 941s, and you can also go into the employer tax info and change that employer to 941, and you will get a third quarter and fourth quarter 941 generated from the system once you change them back to a 941.
Julie had a question. Let me see what it was.
Electronic tax payments.
Tax payments.
Bank account, how many days before the due date? That would be 4 banking days before the due date is the rule of thumb, yes.
Byron, you can only generate 941s in payroll relief for the quarter that you're in. It's not an after-the-fact payroll program. So if you're in quarter 3, you can generate, 941s for quarter 3, but you can't go and enter payroll data for quarters 2 and 1 and get your 941. You can get your W-2s. You can enter and update everything in payroll relief by entering payroll data for quarters 1 and 2, but we will not generate any compliance forms.
Michael, that's an excellent question. Will there be a webinar or some training for how to use after-the-fact payroll and how to decide when to use after-the-fact and when to use live payroll? That is in the works. We do have limited resources, unfortunately, but that's something that's in being considered to do a webinar on after-the-fact payroll. As far as deciding when to use it, I mean, that's pretty straightforward. After the fact payroll, I would use for clients that come into my firm and say, I have whatever number of employees and I paid them and this is what I paid them, and I need you to do the compliance forms, which is basically what us, the accountants, are paid for, is to do the compliance work. So in that case, after the fact payroll is handy because as the name implies, it's after the fact. So you're just entering data that the client has given you to generate the tax compliance forms, as opposed to a client that wants you to do their live payroll on an ongoing basis. Then in that case, definitely payroll relief would be the answer and the way to go with that client. But definitely your suggestion or question about our webinar and after the fact payroll, especially now that we've made some significant changes for the upcoming year, will be done. Julie, a client has 940 electronic tax payment enabled, but no payment has been made yet. Is this because the tax liability hasn't reached $50 yet? It's 500. Yes, 500. You did correct. Yes, 500. There is an option in compliance preferences that if you want the system to make quarterly payments, even though they don't hit the $500 threshold, you can do that. But other than that, the system will, once they hit the 500, then it'll schedule a payment. But again, if it's a cash flow issue and the employer does want to pay it quarterly regardless, you do have that option under compliance preferences.
Carlos, did you see Fernando's question up there? Is there any report that tells me the payroll have to process to any given day? I mean, you can see that in the. I'm sure Fernando knows you can see the snapshot.
On the dashboard,
When
yes.
you log
On the
in.
pay.
Yeah, on the dashboard. And also, when you go into the select client screen, if you click the little drop down arrow, it shows you the payrolls that haven't been processed yet. We have future pay dates. You can see that there too, but they're not exportable to a report, I guess, right?
No. Sticky keys over there, Roger.
I know, and
Got a
actually
noisy
that's a feature
keyboard.
in Windows.
Got a
No,
noisy
not only
keyboard.
that, who's got a noisy keyboard? Me?
You.
Yeah. Well, I can't mute and type at the same time, you know. So either you hear the sticky keys or you don't.
Michael, there is a report for pending payments that will show you if there's any payments past due. As far as the forms, yes, you're right. There is nothing that is exportable for the past due returns. I thought there was something. Hold on a second.
There is a past due in compliance, no?
That's what I was going to
Managed
look at.
compliance?
All those
Yeah.
7 tabs that I mentioned on the managed compliance, I think they're all exportable to Excel. Julie has a question about, can you explain our access to the cloud archive? Like I mentioned before, if you don't own our cloud cabinet application, which I'm getting the feeling that that's the case in this situation, there is an icon that looks like a little cloud in the upper right-hand corner of the screen where all the other icons are. And if you click on that cloud type icon, it will open up Cloud Cabinet, limited version. And in that Cloud Cabinet, it would have folders for each client that's in payroll, and then that each client will have 2 folders, one for forms and one for payroll reports. All right, Roger, I'm gonna get going. I'm needed somewhere else.